The French Foreign Legion had fought in Vietnam, Algeria, Madagascar, hardened men who had seen everything war could show a soldier. When they arrived in West Africa, they expected easy work. What they found instead made them write letters home that their commanding officers did not want the public to read. There was a kingdom in West Africa that nobody had successfully invaded in 2 centuries. It was not the largest, it was not the richest, but it had built something that no other kingdom on earth had ever built. And that thing was about to make the French Foreign Legion feel very small. 6,000 women, each one chosen, each one trained from childhood in the single discipline of ending a human life as efficiently as possible. The French called them Amazons when they finally met them. That name was wrong. Amazons were mythology. The Agojie were real. And they were better. They ran through thorn barriers barefoot. Not as punishment, as training. To teach their bodies that pain was information, not instruction. A soldier who stops when she feels pain is a soldier who dies. The Agojie did not stop. By the time they were fully trained, they could outmarch any man in the kingdom, outfight most of them, and move through jungle at night without making a sound that would wake a sleeping sentry. They struck before dawn. By the time the enemy understood what was happening, the Agojie were already gone. The soldiers they left behind were not going to be writing any letters home. King Gizo understood exactly what he had built. He gave Agojie commanders seats at his war councils. When European visitors arrived and saw women planning military strategy alongside the king, they did not know what to say. Gizo did not explain himself. The results were the explanation. The chronicler described what the Agojie meant to Dahomey.
No king in the region raids Dahomey twice. Not because of the men. Because of what waits behind the men. The Agojie are fresh when the male soldiers are exhausted. They are disciplined when chaos has broken everything else. Fear is the most efficient defense ever invented. Dahomey has made an art of it.
Inside the palace, only the Agojie could enter the king's private quarters. No male soldier. No male official. That access gave them something more dangerous than weapons. It gave them the ear of the most powerful man in the kingdom. Some used it to advise. Some used it to influence succession. Some used it to save kings. Some used it to remove them. This was not a ceremonial role. This was not symbolic. These women held genuine power in a kingdom that had decided war was its highest art. And war had made Dahomey wealthy. Organized agriculture. A taxation system. Royal artisans producing brass and ironwork that traders came from hundreds of miles to buy. The kingdom behind the warriors was sophisticated in ways that the European powers who would eventually come for it fundamentally underestimated. But there is a truth about Dahomey that cannot be buried in the warrior story. The kingdom funded its military partly through the sale of human beings. Conquered enemies marched to the coast. European ships waited. The same kingdom that built the Agojie walked hundreds of thousands of people to those ships. The chronicler refused to look away.
You want to celebrate the Agojie. You should. You want to condemn the slave trade. You must. But you cannot separate them. The same treasury that paid for 6,000 elite warriors was filled by selling human beings to European ships. Both things are Dahomey. Both things are true. History does not give you the option of choosing which parts to keep.
What survived the slave trade was the religion. Dahamean Vodun crossed the Atlantic in the bodies of enslaved people. It became Haitian Vodou. It sustained people through conditions designed to destroy them. It helped organize the Haitian Revolution, the only successful slave revolt in history. The kingdom that sent people into slavery also sent them the spiritual tools to eventually fight back. Everything about Dahomey is a contradiction. Hold all of it. Because the part of the story that comes next has no contradiction in it at all. The French came, and the Agojie were waiting. What France was about to discover was that there is a profound difference between a kingdom that fights to conquer and a kingdom that fights to survive. One of those armies is dangerous. The other is something else entirely. Nobody is certain exactly when the Agojie began. The oral tradition says a king discovered his female palace guards fought better than his male soldiers. So he stopped treating that as a curiosity and started building an army around it. The smartest military decision in the history of West Africa came from someone paying attention to something everyone else was ignoring. A woman who joined the Agojie walked away from everything ordinary life offered. No marriage, no children, no civilian identity. She became, in the legal language of the kingdom, a wife of the king. This was not romantic. It was armor. A wife of the king could not be touched by any man without royal permission. In a world where women had almost no legal protection, the Agojie had absolute protection, in exchange for giving up everything else. The chronicler described what the oath meant in practice.
She will die before she retreats. This is not a metaphor used to inspire recruits. This is a tactical reality. The Agojie's reputation for never retreating is their most powerful weapon. An enemy who knows you will not retreat calculates differently. He hesitates. That hesitation is what kills him.
The training was not designed to make them brave. They were already brave. The training was designed to make pain irrelevant. An Agojie warrior running through thorns barefoot was not proving her courage. She was teaching her nervous system to file pain under information rather than emergency. A soldier who does not panic when she is hurt is worth 10 soldiers who do. They trained against men, specifically against men larger than themselves, because that is who they would face. You do not prepare for war by fighting opponents you can already beat. Musket, machete, razor, 3 weapons, 3 ranges, 3 phases of the same attack. Long-range chaos, medium-range shock, close-range silence. The Agojie fought the entire length of a battle with a different weapon in each hand, depending on how close the dying was. European soldiers who survived encounters wrote accounts that their officers sometimes suppressed. Not because the information was strategically sensitive, because the accounts made European men sound afraid of women. They were afraid. They had every reason to be. The chronicler described how they planned.
They do not raid. They execute. Before a single warrior moves, they know the number of guards, the location of weapons, the timing of watch changes, the fastest path in and the fastest path out. The difference between a raid and an execution is preparation. The Agojie prepare until preparation becomes instinct.
No neighboring kingdom raided Dahomey. Not once. Not in 2 centuries. Think about what that means in a region where kingdoms rose and fell like seasons. Every king who looked at Dahomey's borders looked at them and decided the cost was not worth it. That decision was made for them by 6,000 women with machetes. Gizo invested in them the way a general invests in his best division. The finest weapons available. Real military authority. Real strategic input. He understood that the Agojie were not a curiosity or a tradition. They were the sharpest edge of his kingdom, and he kept that edge sharp. By the mid-1800s, they numbered 6,000. In a kingdom of perhaps 200,000 people, that is an extraordinary commitment. 1 in 30 citizens was an elite soldier. Dahomey was spending itself on its army in a way that no kingdom could sustain forever. The king knew this. He also knew that the alternative was disappearing. In West Africa in the 1800s, those were the only 2 options. Behind the Agojie was a culture of extraordinary depth, brass casting that rivaled anything produced anywhere in the world. Oral traditions preserving centuries of history with the precision of written archives. A religious system sophisticated enough to cross an ocean and survive slavery. Every weapon the Agojie carried was also a sacred object. In Dahomey, war and religion were not separate institutions. They were the same hand making the same gesture. The kingdom had built something remarkable, an army that had never been defeated, a culture that had never been conquered. a religious tradition that would prove impossible to kill. For 2 centuries it held. Then the horizon changed. France had decided it wanted West Africa. It had drawn the maps already. It had signed the treaties with other European powers already. All that remained was the taking. Dahomey was in the way. France had absolutely no idea what being in the way of Dahomey actually cost. The French officers who planned the Dahomey campaign were not stupid men. They had fought in difficult places. They had faced determined enemies. They had done their research. None of their research had adequately prepared them for what was waiting in the jungle, because none of their sources had been willing to tell the truth about what the Agojie were. The assessment was weeks, maybe a month. A small kingdom, a primitive army, muskets but no artillery, tactics from a previous century. The officers were confident. They had never woken to find their sentries dead and the camp surrounded by silence, so complete it felt like a held breath. The first night was quiet. The second night was quieter. The third night the Agojie arrived. They came from every direction simultaneously. No warning, no battle cry. By the time the French sentries understood what was happening, there were no more French sentries. The soldiers who survived wrote home, saying they had faced the most terrifying thing they had ever encountered in 20 years of warfare. The campaign that was supposed to take weeks dragged into months. The French won every battle they could force into the open. The Agojie made sure there were almost none of those. You do not fight the French Foreign Legion in the open with muskets. You fight them at night, in the jungle, at close range, where their superior firepower means almost nothing. The chronicler found the dispatch that officer sent back to Paris.
He writes that the women fight without fear and without hesitation. That they move through the jungle like they were born inside it. That his men are exhausted from fighting an enemy that is never where you expect it to be. He requests reinforcements. He does not say please. Senior officers who do not say please in their dispatches have already understood that please will not be enough.
The jungle was the Agojie's oldest ally. They had trained in it. They had hunted in it. They knew every path, every blind spot, every place where a man carrying a rifle could not see far enough to use it before it was too late. King Hardened had succeeded Guizot. He looked at France's demands, surrender trade rights, accept a protectorate, submit, and he made a calculation that most men would not have made. He decided that dying on his feet was preferable to living on his knees. The Agojie had already made the same decision. A king and his army, aligned on the most important question. That alignment is the most dangerous thing in warfare. France won the first war. Barely. The treaty stripped Dahomey of its coastal access. The Agojie were still intact. Hardened took what remained of his resources and drilled his warriors harder. He bought more modern weapons. He knew France would come back. France always came back. You do not stop halfway through a theft. The chronicler recorded Harden's words before the Second War.
He does not tell his warriors they will win. He tells them that the only thing that matters is making this cost more than France expected. Make them pay for every yard of ground. Make every officer in Paris explain to the newspapers why this small kingdom in West Africa keeps requiring more soldiers and more money. Make the cost political. Because France can replace soldiers. It cannot so easily replace public support for an expensive war.
The Second War came in 1892. France sent a larger force, better armed, with orders to end Dahomey's independence permanently. No more negotiations. No more half measures. This time the objective was total. The Agojie met them in the jungle, and for weeks the jungle was still theirs. Every French advance cost more than it should have. Every French camp was a target. Every French sentry was a risk. The campaign that was supposed to end quickly was bleeding France in men and in money, and in something harder to replace than either: confidence. At the Battle of Agojie, the Agojie made the charge that military historians still struggle to explain. Into fortified positions, into repeating rifles, into artillery, They were cut down in numbers that should have broken any army in history. They charged again. The French commander wrote afterward that he had never seen anything like it in 20 years of warfare. They were not fighting because they thought they would win. They had stopped thinking about winning. They were fighting because some things are worth dying for whether you win or not. That distinction between fighting to win and fighting because you must is what separates soldiers from warriors. The Agojie were warriors. Dahomey fell in November 1892. Before the French entered, Behanzin ordered sections of the royal palace burned. He would not give them the satisfaction of walking through his kingdom intact. He retreated into the interior and fought as a guerrilla for 2 more years. When they finally caught him, he went into exile and died in Algeria, still calling himself the King of Dahomey. The French disbanded the Agojie. They disarmed them. They ordered them back into civilian life, as those 6,000 women trained from childhood to fight could simply choose to become something else. Some complied. Some disappeared into the forest and were never found. The French spent years afterward reporting armed women raiding isolated colonial outposts. They never caught them. Behanzin died in Blida, Algeria in 1906. He had been in exile for 12 years. He had never stopped being the king in his own understanding of the matter. His body was returned to Dahomey in 1928. The French allowed this. They considered it a gesture of magnanimity. The Dahomeyan people considered it the return of their king. The chronicler found the final testimony.
Nawi. Last known surviving Agojie. Interviewed in 1978. Over 100 years old. A journalist asked her whether the French had defeated the Agojie. She thought about it for a moment. Then she said, "They did not defeat us. They ran out of us. There is a difference." She said it the way you state a fact that everyone in the room already knows but is too polite to say out loud.
The door of no return still stands in Ouida. Dahomey built that door. Hundreds of thousands of people walked through it and did not come back. The same kingdom that built the Agojie built that door. Both things are true and neither cancels the other. That is the hardest thing about Dahomey. It demands that you hold the warrior and the slave trader in the same hand and look at both of them at the same time. The Republic of Benin that exists on the territory of Old Dahomey has made the Agojie the foundation of its national identity. Their images on stamps, on murals, in school curricula. A small West African nation tells the world, our grandmothers were the most feared warriors on this continent. They are not exaggerating. When Black Panther came out in 2018 and the world met the Dora Milaje, Ryan Coogler said openly that the Agojie were the direct inspiration. The film made over $1 billion. The world fell in love with African female warriors without knowing that the object of their love had been real, had lived and fought and died, and had been largely forgotten by everyone except the people who descended from them. The Agojie did not need a film to make them real. They made Europe bleed to make that point. The film just finally told the rest of the world what Dahomey had always known. The brass plaques of Dahomey are in museums across the world. The religion they carried into slavery is practiced in Haiti and Brazil and New Orleans right now. Today, while you watch this, the door they built is a memorial. The warriors they built are a national symbol. The kingdom is gone. Everything it touched is still alive. The religious system that Dahomey sent across the ocean organized the only successful slave revolution in human history. The kingdom that sold people into chains also gave them the spiritual architecture to eventually destroy those chains. The contradictions of Dahomey echo across 2 centuries, and they have not stopped echoing. France needed 3 separate wars with professional soldiers and modern weapons to stop them. 3 wars against a kingdom the size of a province. That is the only number you need to understand what the Agojie were. The world still does not have the right word for what they were. Amazon is mythology. Warrior is insufficient. Soldier is too clinical. They were something the world had not made before and has not made since. 6,000 women who gave up everything that ordinary life offers and became instead the thing that every neighboring kingdom feared and every French officer underestimated exactly once. The royal palace Behanzin burned rather than surrender is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The walls he set on fire are standing again. The institution he was defending when he ordered those fires is carved into the cultural identity of every person who lives in that country. In 2021, France returned 26 royal treasures looted from a mummy. It took 129 years. 26 objects out of thousands. The French government called it a gesture of friendship. The Beninese government accepted it. Both sides knew it was not enough. Both sides knew it was a beginning. The chronicler described what 130 years of colonial rule could not erase.
Culture does not need institutions to survive. It needs people who refuse to forget. The French disbanded the Agojie in 1892. The Agojie as an institution ended that day. The Agojie as an idea has never ended. It lives in the women who wear the warrior dress at national ceremonies. It lives in the murals on the city walls. It lives in the film that made $1 billion. You can disband an army. You cannot disband a memory that the people who carry it have decided is worth keeping.
Dahomey holds everything at once. The warriors and the slave traders. The fierce resistance and the terrible complicity. The women who charged artillery with machetes and the merchants who walked their neighbors to European ships. A kingdom that demands you look at all of it simultaneously without the comfort of choosing which parts are real. The kingdom is gone. The nation it became is here. The door is a memorial. The religion is still practiced. The warriors are still celebrated. The contradictions are still unresolved. History rarely wraps itself cleanly. Dahomey is proof. They chose a razor as one of their weapons. Precise, silent, effective at close range. The weapon of someone who gets close enough to make it personal. The Agojie made everything personal. Their kingdom, their oath, their war, their death. The French came with guns and numbers, and the unshakable confidence of a colonial power that had never truly lost. It took 3 wars and the complete military conquest of the kingdom to stop women who had started training before they were teenagers. They were not fighting because they thought they would win. They were fighting because some things are worth dying for whether you win or not. The Agojie knew the difference between those 2 kinds of fighting. They chose the second kind. Every time. The most remarkable army in African history was built from people the world said could not fight. They spent 2 centuries proving the world wrong. Like and subscribe to Empires Untold. The full story is on the channel.